to me. Okay. Out, and then. Well folks, welcome back to another episode of TA Outdoors. I'm back out in the woods with Dustin. Hey. We're working on a mini series. This is probably only going to be 2, 3, maybe 4 episodes. We're not sure yet. But the plan is for this kind of mini series is we're building a wigwam using natural materials as much as we can. At the moment we're just building the frame. So episode 1 is focusing on the frame and the just general structure. It's actually quite a simple structure to make. It's just the collecting the resources that takes time. Now, after this, we are, hear me out guys, we are hoping to bark roof it. Dustin nearly collapsed on the floor when I told him that we were going to be doing a bark roof. After the Viking house, it was pretty, yeah, it took a long time. Anyone who's worked with bark and things like that and using it as a roofing material will know that it's a bit of a problem to work with.
That bark peeling for the Viking house, that was a nightmare.
It really is.
So I'm not looking forward to peeling bark for this.
No, but it's going to be, you know, we're basing this on kind of a First Nations style shelter, and in that they did use bark. I don't know what type of bark they used as such, probably cedar, maybe ash or something like that. But we are in a cedar woodland. This is a cedar forest. So we're going to use the resources that we are around us, like we did with the Viking house. So we're going to use cedar. So the cedar bark peeling takes a long time, but we're going to do a bit more on that in the next episode. This is our wigwam shelter. I'm going to take you guys over and explain what we've done and what we're trying to do with the structure. And then Dustin's going to cook up a feast, as usual, and we're going to have a good time and just chill out in the woods. So here's the structure itself. We're hoping for this to be the doorway. Like I say, we've based this on a First Nation style structure. So what we've got is hazel. The actual frame itself is built out of hazel. It's green hazel because that's got all that moisture in it, which means it's really easy to bend. The other reason we're using hazel is because it fares pretty well to coppicing, which is cutting it. So although it kind of looks like, well it is, we're cutting down small saplings, hazel actually thrives when it is cut. So each time we cut, and where we leave that clean cut with the saw, that's then going to have, that's going to sprout some small saplings a year, maybe even a couple of years down the line. And every time you cut it, it keeps growing. If you cut down a tree maybe this big, a couple of years later you'll have lots of saplings coming out of it, and it will just keep growing. It fares really well. Over here it's called woodland management. I don't know what it's called where you guys do it, but yeah, over here it's just a way of managing a woodland. And by keeping those saplings at a minimum, it allows the older mature trees to flourish, and it's the same anywhere really. So the frame itself is hazel saplings. For the bindings we're actually using cedar bark and the kind of inner strands of cedar bark. I'll show you now. So this is the bark we've been using, and it's cedar. This is a cedar forest, and they're cutting down some of these cedar trees to use for firewood and other things, so it's also being managed. This is what it looks like. It's kind of got that gnarly looking bark to it, and it's a kind of dark brown fissured looking bark. And this is an awesome resource, awesome tree to work with. You've got your outer bark here, which is fairly easy to recognize when you see the cedar trees. I'll show you them in a minute. But the great thing about cedar is the inner bark is really easy to peel off in strands like this, and you can often get long pieces of cord just by pulling that inner bark off like that. You can see that's now stripping from the main piece of the bark, and now I've got my inner bark, which obviously the outer bark is fairly rigid, but that inner bark, you can wrap it around your hands, you can wrap it around your fingers. It's very easy to work with. Now what we did originally on the Viking house is we worked with the bark, and once we peeled it off the tree, even though the tree was on the floor, once we peeled it off, it then had no moisture in it because it was drying out. The air would dry it out, the sun would dry it out. So that meant that on the Viking house, the bark then would shrink, and it would keep shrinking and constricting as it dries, which would then leave holes. So where you'd overlap it with each piece of bark, it would start leaving gaps. And it's the same principle here. So we're going to use that to our advantage, and we've put the bark in water. We've soaked it overnight. You only need to soak it for a few hours, really. We've soaked it overnight, and that means now that it's really malleable, it's really wet. So 2 reasons: it makes the knot tying really easy. We can pull it tight, and then once that dries, that knot's going to constrict even more and stay rigid and make a really strong, tough binding. So that's the reason we're using the inner bark of cedar, and we've used it, as you can see in the background, on most of the joining points and the pressure points where the hazel is. Now working on the ribs here. So we've done the main frame, the dome-like structure. We're now working on these ribs. These can actually just be woven in with the hazel, and most of it doesn't need binding because it's bending out and it's putting pressure on the uprights. So it's all kind of self-supporting. But where it's going to spring out, we have put binding. And you can see here, there is the cedar binding, which is pulling that all tight together, and that's stopping this horizontal splitting out. And eventually, in a couple of days, that's going to constrict, and it's going to keep everything nice and secure. We're pretty pleased so far. This is going to be our doorway. It's a 2-man shelter, and we're going to do some awesome things. Hopefully some cool feasts and things with it. Yeah, it's going to come along well. And we've got Dustin's epic lean-to shelter here. Double lean-to, really, actually, isn't it?
Yeah, it needs a bit more. It needs a bit more work, a bit more debris on the roof. There's a few patches, but you know, little and often, every little helps.
Exactly, yeah. That is looking good, and you've got a fire pit down there, which we're going to use in a bit. And we've got Amber with us today, and yeah, we're going to crack on, I think, and get these ribs done. So we're peeling bark at the moment, our favourite job. We absolutely love that on TA Outdoors. And we found these have just been cut. Recently they blew down in a storm, so those of you that remember the storm when we had the Viking house, there's a couple of cedar trees have blown down, almost hitting the Viking house. Well, these actually have been sectioned up now, and you can see I was just saying to Dustin when we do the initial cut, you can see the different layers in the tree. You kind of got the outer bark there, then you've got this like pink layer, which I reckon is the kind of cambium layer, and then you've got the sort of inner bark here. And we've always found that if you don't dig your knife in deep enough, and you at the beginning, and you only get the pink layer there, then it splits and the bark's actually really thin. So you have to go in. That's probably, I don't know, 5 mil, 6, maybe more than that. That's 8 mil nearly, 8 mil thick. And you just put your knife in like that without pushing too deep, and you just use your knife as a lever rather than stabbing all the way down. You just work along. And I'm actually cutting into the tree slightly here, which is fine. This is going to be used as firewood, but then that stops my knife point punching through the outside. So I'm just using that as a lever. I'm not actually pushing too hard on my knife. I'm just using it as a lever. But this is good bark. It's lovely and wet. This inner bark is lovely and wet and smooth, which does mean it's going to shrink loads. So we're going to probably get it on the shelter in episode 2. But we definitely need to get it used because it will shrink. Don't we love bark peeling?
I absolutely love it.
Well, we have spent a good day setting up the Wigwam Shelter and obviously the good old-fashioned bark peeling. Thankfully we found some good trees actually to peel some of the bark, which we're quite pleased with. So that's going to be continuing on into episode 2. But before we do that, I'm quite hungry, so I think it's probably time for a feast. Here is the bark that we've just peeled. You can see it's from much bigger logs than we used on the Viking house, so we've got a much bigger surface area, which is really nice to have. What we've done, because we're not coming back for a few days, is we've laid them down, haven't we, Dustin? Like,
yeah, and they just added a bit of water
we threw some water on there to keep the moisture in it, because otherwise they're going to constrict like this and bind up, and they're all going to arch up, and it's going to be really not very easy to work with. So
but a lovely bit of bark, not many holes in it at all. Yeah,
it's really good. I mean, we've got some holes in this big piece, but we'll work around that and we can patch up where possible. But it's a really long piece, this. It's probably like 15 feet nearly.
Yeah,
so
I think we were quite lucky to find that freshly cut fallen tree, because the bark seems to peel off so much easier than it did when we did the Viking house.
It really does, yeah, it really does. special treatment. So we got pork belly with a maple. Is it maple syrup?
It's like a maple glaze.
Like a maple glaze. These are epic, guys. They're absolutely awesome. Then we got a couple of peppers, small sweet peppers, which are really nice. Red onion. What were the burgers? I've never heard of this type of burger before. They were
steak haché.
haché.
It's kind of like it's a French take on a burger. It's almost like a very coarsely chopped, but good quality steak meat, and then turned into a burger. Steak haché.
And then we've got this like spicy Mexican cheese on top,
with
which we did have a sneak taste while it was cooking, which was awesome.
It was really good.
We had jalapenos inside. Again, red onion in there. These look awesome.
Some salad as well. Some rocket.
Got to throw those greens in there somewhere.
Oh yeah, got to keep it healthy.
Yeah.
But peppery.
That cheese is awesome as well. Yeah, peppery steak. I like that. Good touch with the ciabatta bread as well. Feast is a feast. When you're hungry, all food goes down a treat. Oh, Amber's just dribbling everywhere. So this, if I'm right, is the elderflower champagne.
This is it, yeah. Elderflower champagne, and it's just elderflower heads I've picked. I picked them about 5 weeks ago.
Yeah.
Maybe 4 weeks ago. And this is the final product. And I've got to warn you, I've had a few already. Not today.
Okay.
But I've had a few already over the last week.
Yeah.
And it's quite strong.
We're in for a treat.
It is quite strong. Right. So I'm not sure. It might be a bit.
Should we go F1 style?
Powerful. It might be F1 winning the F1. It might just be a pop.
Okay.
Woo.
That is
flavour.
That is so nice.
It's so refreshing, and it doesn't. Well, I really don't think it tastes alcoholic.
No, it's like a fruity.
But wait until you get to the bottom of the bottle, then you'll know. You'll be swerving on the way home.
Look at that. That's awesome.
Cheers.
Cheers, mate. Another project. Looking forward to this one.
Oh yeah.
And then we've got an even bigger one coming later in the year, guys. So you'll have to keep your eyes out for that. But this is going to be a cool project anyway.
This will be a good
little mini one.
Yeah. We won't finish it today.
No way.
Might take one day.
I reckon we're going to have maybe 2 or 3 more episodes.
Yeah.
2 or 3 more. Yeah.
So give it a few weeks, maybe 1 day a week, maybe 2 days a week.
Just working away at it.
It'll be good.
It'll be awesome.
It'll be different.
Had a few questions lately about the Saxon house and what's happened to it and where has it gone. It's still there. The Saxon house is still there. The project is still ongoing. I think we said at the end of the previous Saxon house episode that we're waiting on some thatch and the material, and that I was going to try and get a thatcher in. That is still in the process. It's actually very difficult at the moment to get hold of thatchers because it's the peak season for them to be thatching roofs. It's also hard to get the thatch itself. So bear with me on that, guys. It will be coming. We will be finishing the Saxon house at some point. It's just one of those things where it's going to take maybe a month, maybe 2 months before we can finish the roof. So keep an eye out for that. I might try and do an episode in between that where we finish up the interior of the walls with some clay and things like that. So it's still there. It's not going anywhere. I appreciate your patience. Thank you for your patience. I know there's some really keen guys out there who want to see the Saxon house, so it's still going to be going. But we're going to call it a day.
We are.
I think we're done here. Thanks so much for watching part 1 of the Wigwam Shelter. We will see you guys in part 2.